Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Alex Shannan, and I am a Housing Navigator at Developmental Services Ontario. So I'm going to guess that probably most of you in the room are pretty familiar with DSO, who we are and what we do. Do I see any heads not nodding? I'll give a brief overview, just in case. I'm happy to answer questions either throughout the presentation or at the end. I've been at DSO for the last 4 years in roles, Service Navigator position as well as an Application Assessor position. And then last year, in the fall of last year, I stepped into the new Housing Navigator role at DSO. So basically, for those of you who may not know, DSO is the centralized access point for Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services funded adult developmental services. So basically, in the past, before DSO, agencies managed their own waiting lists for services, and now DSO is the central access point. So that happened in 2011. And so we make sure that we determine whether or not an individual is eligible to receive services through DSO, help them to understand the application package process, so the application for developmental services and supports and the supports intensity scale, as you complete that application, and then to help them to determine what ministry-funded services they're interested in receiving, and we put them on the registries for those services, and then help to match individuals to the services that they're interested in once a space is available. In addition to that, we try to also provide information about general community services, either within the developmental sector or outside of the developmental sector. So if you want to connect with us, you can always check out our website. They've been updating the website pretty frequently lately. So there's lots of updated information about who we are and what we do. And it's also easy to find out which DSO an individual should be connecting with. And you can also call 211. So, the housing navigation role at DSO, basically it was created, the ministry created the position in 2017 in response to feedback from the Ombudsman's report from 2016. So they decided that they should have a housing navigation position at the DSO to help individuals who were interested in exploring what options might exist outside of waiting for ministry-funded residential services. So what we're doing is we're looking to work with individuals who are interested in kind of getting a little bit creative, and either while they wait for ministry-funded services or instead of ministry-funded services, individuals who are looking to create a more person-centered housing plan. So as housing navigators, we don't actually sit down with individuals and create a housing plan with them, but what we are working to do is gather information and resources that can help people with that process. And we're referring them to different services that exist within the community. We're trying to pool this has been happening for a while, right? People have been looking at creating their own housing plans for quite some time. There's a lot of information out there, but it's spread out all over the place. So what we're trying to do is bring the information together and make the process a little bit less daunting. So basically what we're doing is we're bringing the resources together. We're working to create a toolkit of resources which will be available online as well as in printed format. It's going to be a very comprehensive resource, which we don't imagine will be something that we will kind of have the whole thing printed and say, here you go, here is the toolkit. Basically, it's going to be a collection of information and resources which, again, can be accessed online. And for those individuals who aren't comfortable with accessing online resources or would just prefer to have something printed, I think how I envision interacting with it is going through the toolkit with the individual, looking at where they're at in their planning process and what information might be helpful, and then providing that information to them. So we are working on that. It's kind of an ongoing process, but we do hope to have something available very soon. I anticipate that it's something that will be released in stages as opposed to having the whole thing ready and put out there. So stay tuned for that. I have actually on the table here. I have a sign-up sheet. If you're interested in providing your name and contact information, and you'd be interested in receiving correspondence from me, you can go ahead and do that. I will definitely be letting people know once we have information available with regards to the toolkit. The other thing that we're trying to encourage individuals to do is to connect with support networks in the community. So whether that's like a formal support group or family network, or whether it's just getting together with like-minded individuals in the community, basically looking for ways to connect with others who have similar ideas and are on a similar path, to share information and experience and to support one another and motivate and inspire one another. So I have a list of different groups that are happening around the city. I've been going out and doing presentations to those groups and encouraging individuals to connect with that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm talking mostly with caregivers is who I've been connecting with so far, so caregivers and professionals. And so I will talk to them about kind of where they're at in their planning process, and then try to provide information that relates to what they're looking for, or where they're at. We've compiled a list of self-assessments and questionnaires to help individuals figure out where they're at and where they need to go, and how they might sort of look to work on those things. And we're also sharing success stories of others that are on this journey, or who have successfully created and implemented housing plans. Partners for Planning, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the Partners for Planning website. It's a great resource, and they have some success stories on there. We're also looking to, as we're meeting with individuals, we're looking to gather those stories ourselves, and perhaps we'll be posting those on our website, or including them in the toolkit in some form. So if you know somebody who would be interested in connecting with us and sharing their story, please feel free to share my information, and go from there. So one of the things that can be really helpful when somebody is undertaking the process of an individualized housing plan is connecting with others, and whether that is, again, through connecting with a group in the community, or whether it's connecting with other caregivers or support networks who are planning. It's a great way to share resources, share information, but also to provide moral support and to motivate one another. So I am working to kind of, as I'm speaking with people, I am collecting a list. So I have my distribution list, and I'm indicating when somebody has expressed an interest in connecting with other people. Sometimes I'm approached by families who are interested in looking at a roommate type of setup. So I'm trying to keep track of that, and I hope to be able to help with the facilitation of connecting individuals together. So that's something that I'm working on. So the information that we're sharing, so we want to make sure that obviously we share information, and we can provide guidance around how to access ministry-funded services, but also encouraging individuals to look at what resources might be available outside of the developmental sector, and exploring things like social housing, and how do you apply for that, and how do you make sure that you keep your application up to date, and what types of social housing is going to be best suited for you. So I've compiled information around that and can provide that to individuals. Also, I've been starting to set up meetings with the city to see if there might be ways for us to kind of work together, share information, raise awareness around the needs of adults with developmental disabilities as it relates to housing. The city is in the process right now of creating their 10-year housing plan, so homeless and housing plan. So I hope to be able to participate in the conversations that are happening around that, and to have some input. So I share information about Ontario Renovates or Toronto Renovates, which unfortunately right now is on hold. I guess there's some uncertainty around funding and budgets, and so as of January 24th, they're no longer accepting applications, or they put a hold on accepting applications. I I'm trying to connect with different agencies in the community who provide support in the realm of housing, again, to share information about the population that we serve, but also to look for possible partnerships and opportunities to collaborate with one another, and sharing a list of local affordable housing options is something that I can do as well. So when we are working through the process of trying to support somebody on this journey, we have sort of developed this support sequence. So inspired by the Just Enough Supports model that Helen Sanderson and Associates have created, we look at generally guiding people through the process of looking at what are their personal strengths and assets. So what do they already have? What skills do they already have and do they bring to the table? And then how can those skills be continue to be built, as well as where are the gaps and how can we look at filling those gaps? One of the elements or one of the ways to fill potential gaps is looking at assistive technology and how we can incorporate that to limit or to reduce the amount of physical support a person might need from others, or to increase safety or accessibility within a home. So there's lots of great work happening in the realm of technology. Some of it is still a little pricey, but there's some very promising stuff coming out. So we're trying to encourage individuals to look at how they might be able to incorporate that into their housing plan. My colleague up in the north is working on a pilot project with an organization where they've got a try before you buy project going. So where individuals can try technology and decide whether or not it's something that works for them and enhances their plan, and if so, there's opportunities to then purchase the technology. So that's something that's new and is happening right now. And also we want individuals to look at the natural supports that they already have and that could potentially be built on, right? So I think a lot of times families and individuals, it's kind of hard to identify some of the natural supports that could be harnessed. We all have busy lives, and you know, those around us all have busy lives, but there's going to be some great resources that we're already connected to within the community. One of the individuals, an individual who lives in my neighborhood, he used to go with his father every weekend to a coffee shop, and it was like a social gathering, an informal social gathering that he'd been participating in for years. His father suddenly passed away, and without even being asked, members of the group said, okay, well, we're gonna pick him up. We're gonna pick him up, we're gonna make sure he gets home safely, to have him continue to be included in that social gathering, to maintain those connections. So looking for kind of opportunities like that and building on that. And then of course, formal supports. So formal supports, as I said already, obviously there are formal supports available within the developmental sector, but encouraging individuals and helping individuals to connect with the services and supports that are available to anybody within the community. So looking at what support the LINs might be able to provide, looking at where applicable, if an individual could register with Access Point and get services through Access Point, recreation through the welcome policy, just trying to get creative and making sure that we're tapping into all available resources in the community to kind of make these plans work. And then you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the services that MCSS funds. As I said in the beginning, individuals are welcome to continue to wait for ministry-funded services whilst engaging in this process of planning around housing. And so we're able to provide information about that and look at how those services might work into a plan. And then the self-funded piece of it. So this role, I don't have any housing attached to me. I don't have, there's no housing attached to me. There's no funding attached to this role. So when we talk about the cost of implementing a plan like this, families say, okay, well, how are we going to be able to do that? So first of all, encouraging them to get creative and looking at the resources that they might have at their disposal. So if an individual's working, employed, or if they're receiving ODSP, how that factors into the planning process. And then looking at, things like a Henson Trust in order to make sure that if, financial resources or property is being left to an individual, that it's done in a way that it doesn't impact the other services, like for instance ODSP that they're receiving. Encouraging individuals to look into RDSPs and the disability tax program, and then looking at grants and fundraising that might be available in order to support elements of a plan. The other thing is that, so families will say, okay, so we've gone through this planning process and we know we've got a budget, we kind of have an idea of what this is going to cost to implement, and we don't have the funds to do it. We can't make this sustainable. Why would we bother kind of carrying on down this road of planning? And so one of the things that we're encouraging them to do or kind of explaining is that in the past the ministry has provided at different times individualized funding for residential supports. We don't know if or when that might become available again in the future, but we do know that when that has happened in the past, what happens is they release a request for proposals. And there's a really short turnaround time. You've usually got about a couple of weeks to submit your proposal for consideration. So if you've already begun to embark on this planning process and you've gathered this information and have it at the ready, you're in a much better position to then apply for funds should they become available. So trying to kind of encourage people in that way. In the spring of last year, housing navigators across the province, and I guess I didn't say in the beginning, so there's 9 housing navigators across the province, or there's 9 DSOs across the province. There's the equivalent of 5 full-time housing navigators across the province. So each DSO has a housing navigator or housing navigators. Some are in part-time positions. And so we conducted a survey in the spring of last year. The survey was sent out across the province, and we received a total of 418 responses to the survey. The nice thing was we received a pretty wide spread of responses from across the province, and also responses from individuals who are at various different stages in the process of planning. With regards to the ages of individuals, you guys have this slide. It's really small. It's very hard to read the print on it, so I apologize for that. But basically, we received responses from individuals across the age range of 6 to 60. And 80% of respondents were either individuals who were within the age range or responding on behalf of an individual who was between 19 to 49 years of age. So the vast majority were between 19 to 49 years of age. And then with regards to where they were at within the planning process, it was encouraging for us. 402 people responded, 26 said they would like to start planning but didn't know where to start. So obviously we hope to be helpful with that. 36% said they were actively in the process of planning but they needed more information in order to continue. 13% said they were actively planning and had a support network and partners in the community already. And 6% said they were in the process of implementing a plan. So once again, it was encouraging to receive responses from individuals across the spectrum of the planning process. The reason we conducted the survey was to try to inform the toolkit that we're putting together. So these are the probable toolkit topics, the overarching topics that we'll be covering in the toolkit. So creating a housing plan, where to go for housing, looking at things like for individuals who can decide between renting and buying, looking at the pros and cons of renting and buying, looking at, with renting, different options and ways to try to find affordable housing in the city, which we know is a huge challenge. Housing support models, so looking at different potential support models, and sharing stories, sharing success stories is kind of falls into this really nicely, but we're not promoting a sort of this is the model that one person has created, so let's just replicate that over and over and over again. We're really trying to promote person-centered, individualized planning, so making a plan that is built around the individual and their unique strengths and assets, but also support needs. Funding a plan. Again, this is a tricky area, but we are doing our best to try to gain as much information as possible about different grants that could be used. So looking at the Toronto Renovates, looking at different things that might be available through the National Housing Strategy, trying to connect with the municipalities. We are trying to connect with the municipalities as well as Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to learn about how we can support individuals to try to harness the resources that are out there, and to support partnerships. So with developers and agencies from within the developmental sector, etc. Creating a budget, managing housing supports, and how do we sustain those supports and the plan in general. Housing to learn from across the province and around the world, so looking at different models that have been implemented across Toronto, across Ontario, the country, internationally. And then also, there's a ton of toolkits that have already been created by other agencies and groups. So, we have those available as well, some of those available as well. When we surveyed individuals, particular areas of interest, these were some of the particular areas of interest that were listed. I think you guys can read that pretty well on your handout, so I'm not going to go ahead and read through it. And then, what are we at for time? Okay, so I have a video, which is from the Partners for Planning website. So this is a video that is about a gentleman by the name of Peter, who was institutionalized at a young age and then returned home in his late teens to live with his mom. And his family sort of knew that they were going to need to put a plan in place for Peter, but thought that they would have time. Mom passed away suddenly, and this video shows how the family responded to that. Hopefully I have a play. Oh, you do? Okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. Okay, so, yeah, it's fine. So basically what happened, as I said, Mom passed away suddenly. Peter's siblings lived here in Toronto, and they thought, okay, well, we're gonna have to move Peter to Toronto with us, or we're gonna have to try to find a group home situation for Peter. And so Peter said, that's not what I want. I'm quite happy here. I'm comfortable here in my home and in my community. And so working with somebody from Community Living Windsor, Essex, I believe it was, Peter was able to create, with his support network, a plan that worked for him. He was an individual who was lucky enough to be able to tap into individualized funds. And he was able to go out into the community and decide who he wanted to hire as supports for him. So instead of the network looking at, okay, well, we're going to hire professionals to support Peter in the home, Peter went out into the community and spoke with people that he knew and had a connection with and asked if they would be willing to be a part of his network of support. So he had he has a favorite restaurant, a Greek restaurant that's close to his home, and he went and approached one of the waitresses at the restaurant. And then he had a connection with somebody at his local Shoppers Drug Mart, and he approached her and asked if she would come on board. And then I believe the third person was a neighbor in his area. So it's great to see. It's a great example of not necessarily looking for the experts in the community that have been working in the developmental sector for X number of years, but who are the people that Peter felt he had a connection with and wanted to support him. It's a neat video. It is on the Partners for Planning website. so you can check that out. There's other videos as well. And as I said, we're looking to connect with people who are willing to share their stories with us. And hopefully we'll have more to release in that realm. So really important, we really want to hear from you. So if you are working with individuals who are interested in this kind of planning, please feel free to provide them with my contact information. But also if you're hearing information from them and you feel you have feedback that you could provide to us, we really want to hear about that. Also I've been going out and doing presentations mostly to family groups is what I've been doing so far, but we are going to be looking to host presentations that have sort of an information session component to it. So if you feel that there are topics that would be great for us to incorporate, please, I'm all ears. The other thing is that I'm hoping, so I'm sort of in the early stages of connecting with CMHC and with the city, and hope to be sort of connecting with maybe developers who are interested in doing work in our sector. And so if you're open to partnerships and would like to, basically if I hear of somebody who's interested and they're looking to connect with a not-for-profit agency and you would like me to have your contact information and maybe help with that connection, please let me know. I'm definitely not at that stage right now, but it's something that I'm hoping to be able to do in the future. So, this is my contact information, you have it there. I would say if you have general questions about DSO, or please contact our intake line. If you have questions about the housing navigation role or my work or want to connect with me and discuss further, please feel free to connect with me directly, and please feel free to share my contact information with those that you're working with. Does anybody have any questions?
Shannan, would you be available to visit agencies and speak to parent groups?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So the question was, I didn't hear.
The question was, would I be willing to visit agencies and speak to parent groups? And yes, absolutely, I'm willing to do that. And I've been doing that a little bit so far, so yeah.
So just for the video, we're trying to get questions on the mic, so I can come around. I'll give you the mic whenever you have one.
Do you have a catchment area? Because I see it says DSO Toronto region. So what about your region?
So there is a facilitator in York Region, a navigator in York Region. There's actually there's one facilitator in York Region. So for me here in Toronto, you can connect with me directly. So anywhere, if you go onto the DSO website, if it's an M postal code, it's me. That's pretty easy. For other regions, if you go onto the DSO website, you can plug in the postal code of the individual that you're kind of inquiring around and connect with the intake department at that DSO. So that's the easiest way to do it.
So there is another housing navigator in every DSO.
Yeah, so there's the equivalent of 5 full-time across the 9 regions. So DSO Central East, York Region is in DSO Central East, but the Central East region is a large region. There's two part-time facilitators there.
All right, thank you.
2 questions. The first one is, how many people would you serve in a year?
That's a good question. I don't know yet, and so this is still, so there's no waiting list for this service. Yeah, so basically anybody who's reaching out to me, I'm trying to respond to that, and so I'm not sure. I haven't been doing it for a year yet, and I'm not sure exactly.
Okay, thanks. My second question was, how long is the wait list?
There isn't a wait list.
Thank you.
It's more of an information provision and kind of referral service, right? That's what my role is like. So I'm anybody reaches out to me and I'm going to try to work with them to figure out, okay, so what information might be helpful for them to receive at the stage that they're at. And a lot of that is, so encouraging them to connect with sometimes the Lights program or with a person-directed planner or an independent facilitator who could provide more hands-on support with the actual, like, working on the goals and figuring out the goals and working towards those goals. So I don't anticipate, I don't think there will be a wait list.
Okay, thank you.
Please, can you help shed some light on the role of the independent facilitator?
Mhm. So independent facilitators, so there has been a project that has been running since 2015, I think, since 2015, where the DSO was matching individuals to independent facilitation. I think that project is coming to an end as of March of next year, but independent facilitators will. That's right. I'm still thinking it's like 2018. Yeah, no, in March. So independent facilitators work with individuals basically to kind of help them to determine goals and then realize those goals. So it depends on the individuals. Some individuals work with facilitators around a housing plan. Other individuals might have other goals, so increasing participation within the community, finding employment. So they help individuals to kind of break those goals down, sometimes identify goals, because sometimes individuals have a hard time even knowing. You say, okay, well, what do you want to do? And it's like, I don't know, what are my options, right? So helping them to identify what their goals might be, and then breaking those goals down into measurable steps, and helping them work towards make gains towards realizing those goals. And just generally increasing kind of connection with the community and participation in the community, generally.
If individuals, parents passed away and then have a space and looking for the roommates, and then if that individual reach out to you, then what could be your solution?
So it's a tough one because generally those situations are pretty urgent. So when embarking on a housing plan, generally that's something that it takes time, right? There's a lot of different things to consider, a lot of different arrangements to be made, and so it's hard to do that really quickly. We don't want to rush to try to put something in place that isn't going to meet the individual's needs or isn't going to be sustainable. So definitely I can try to provide information about different resources, housing resources. You're saying somebody, a parent has passed away and they have housing,
yeah,
but they
have
need
housing,
support.
They need support, but instead of selling the house, if they just looking for the roommate. And then what could be the role of DSO? What kinds of support is possible, like fundraising or other business?
So DSO wouldn't be involved, we wouldn't do fundraising. We could definitely update their profile with DSO, and if there were supports that they could receive, ministry-funded supports, we would want to make sure that they're waiting for those supports. With regards to finding a roommate, at this moment in time, my list of individuals who are looking to connect with roommates is pretty short. And we have yet to develop a kind of a process for what it might look like. So I hope to be able to help with making those connections because it kind of makes sense, right? But there's things that we have to look at around that. So we have to kind of develop what that's going to look like. So that's something that's more, we're looking to the future to be able to try to support that. So I would provide information about different resources in the community, but it's hard to respond to immediate situations like that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to get the immediate response. I want just to have a vision about what sort of things is possible through the DSO, because urgent response we can case manage it, but that housing pieces.
So in the situation that you're speaking about, they have housing,
Yes.
but they potentially need support.
Yeah.
Yes. And they would be potentially looking to also live with a roommate.
Yes.
A roommate who is another individual who has a developmental disability, or a roommate who could
Yeah.
provide supports.
So then, if they connect you, then are you able to looking through the list and then suggest
Some roommates? So
or
definitely-
what- so I want
We have to work that process out. So we have to figure out what that's going to look like. It certainly wouldn't be just me randomly giving people's names out, for sure.
Yeah.
So it would need to be more of a coordinated process than that. And so that's something that to kind of look to the future. That's something that we hope to be able to work on and develop for the future. But right now we don't have a formalized process in place to do that. Nor do we have enough individuals who've expressed an interest in it.
And do you have a specialized fund for those processes?
No. So there's no funding at all attached to my role.
Okay.
There's no support, so I don't have access to, let's say, supported independent living supports, anything like that. But we at the DSO can make sure that we update an individual's profile and that they are waiting for the services that could potentially benefit them. The other thing to bear in mind is that DSO, the service registries through DSO, they're not chronological waiting lists. So when we update an individual's profile, what happens is an individual has a profile and that's prioritized within our system. And when we make updates and changes to that system, that priority can change.
Yeah, I know that.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I just want to figure out what is your specialized, that this housing navigate position is different than other in DSO.
It is different, for sure. So we're trying to provide information about the resources that already exist within the community. Right now, there are definitely resources that exist to try to support individuals with finding roommates. That's something that you might hear about in the second presentation, but it's not as easy as just saying, okay, call this agency, they're gonna find your roommate. That doesn't exist right now. So that's something that we recognize is a gap. And is there a way for us to try to address that gap in some way? That's what we want to look at.
So you're still in process.
We're still in process, yeah, for sure.
What would be the differences between like a pediatric client versus an adult client that you would kind of work with?
So in order for an individual to access my services, they need to be 18 years of age or older. However, so for instance, I'm going out and I'm doing presentations. So last night I did a presentation at an organization that supports both children and adults. And there were people in the audience who, there were individuals as well as caregivers of individuals who were children and adults, or youth and adults. So I'm happy to share information. The information, the toolkit information is going to be available on our website. It can be accessed by absolutely anybody. Another thing is that a lot of the information is relevant not just to individuals with developmental disabilities, right? Because we're trying to encourage people to harness the resources that exist outside of the developmental service, as well as within the developmental sector. But I wouldn't be able to kind of speak with or spend a lot of time working with an individual who is supporting somebody who was under the age of 18. But we are encouraging people who are, so when I'm going out and speaking to schools or when I'm speaking to agencies who are supporting individuals who are of transitional age, encouraging them to connect with the DSO at 16, because that's as early as they can do it, but also to start planning for this stuff as early as possible. So, you know, if an individual or if a family is able to look at RDSPs, starting to plan something like that as quickly as possible, and just starting these conversations as early as possible. What does the person envision for their future? What kind of a home do they want to have in the future when they're ready to start thinking more seriously about that transition? Starting those conversations as early as possible and getting an idea of what the individual is interested in. We're definitely encouraging that. You can't start thinking about this topic too soon.
This may be an unfair question, but if the Independent Facilitation Network or Partners for Planning goes down, how big a hit is that to the work you do?
Well, so we're lucky in Toronto that there is funded person-directed planning. So we do have a service registry for person-directed planning at this time. That is still a viable service. The other thing is that I'm sure you're all aware that there were changes last year to Passport. And so now when an individual is eligible for services through DSO, they're also eligible to receive $5,000 in Passport funding. And Passport funding can be used to purchase private person-directed planning or independent facilitation services. So I don't think there's a risk necessarily of the independent facilitation network going down. They've been around for a long time. They were around long before the pilot project with the ministry. However, services, as far as I'm aware, are no longer going to be funded through the ministry. So we will still continue to direct individuals to that service, and as well as add people to the service registry for PDP, person-directed planning in Toronto. That's not something that exists in all regions of the province, though. Did I evade your question? Any other questions?
So you said that you're hoping to meet with builders and that you could possibly connect us. So is it a matter of emailing you, leaving you information? Yes?
Yes. Yeah. So
There's no process.
yeah, so I have just a regular sort of distribution list, which right now I'm not distributing, like I haven't been distributing a ton through it. And I also have a list of agencies that are interested in working in this area. So definitely, yeah, just reach out, email, phone, whatever works.